Cool. So thank you for coming to my talk. This is called Teaching New Dogs Old Tricks. I got the title wrong when I submitted it and completely butchered the saying or whatever it is. So a bit about me. I'm a penetration tester. Like we said before, I work for Quantum. I'm a principal technical consultant there. Some of my interests are physical security, network pen testing, 3D printing, and electronics. I've spoken a couple of times at CHCCon in the past about 3D printing keys for doors and gun safes and padlocks and things like that. And last year I spoke about building a little low-cost backdoor chip for those RFID card readers that you see on businesses all around the place. So I thought I'd do something slightly different this year and talk about one of my other interests, which is network pen testing. There's nothing new in this talk. I hope you'd get that from the title where it says old tricks. In the blurb where it said works every time, that's not quite true. Like with all these things, they kind of work most of the time, but not all the time. And most of the techniques that we'll be talking about are roughly around the 10-year-old range. So hopefully everyone can learn a bit of security history and come out of this knowing something new, even if you've been doing this a while. Cool. So we'll be talking about what is a network pen test. So at least if you're very new, hopefully you can still get something useful out of this. Getting access to a network, what responder is, reading Active Directory using AD Explorer, SMB looting, using other servers as pivots, and things more valuable than dumping SAM and system. Cool. So what is a network pen test? So I'd sort of hope that at least everyone knows what a network is since you're here, like a bunch of computers all stuck together to do things. This can be a product network if you're building a solution to offer to people, or it can be an office network where you work in your office with your coworkers, or it could be, if you're a huge organization, it could be multiple offices all joined together that essentially just make up a big office. And so in a network pen test, we want to look at the way data moves around these networks to manipulate that in a way that's going to work for us. So what we want to do is, like it says, hack some things, hack some more things, hack the important thing, and get paid, which you can kind of see in this graphic here, if it's not too dark. So we have our bad guy who hacks a thing, then uses that to go hack some more things, and then big pile of money, and we get paid at the end, which is great. Cool. So first we're going to talk about getting access. So I tried my hand at taking stock photos and plugged an Ethernet cable into some graphics cards. But so the plan for getting access, it feels wrong to include this as a 10-year-old vulnerability, but this hasn't changed in the last 10 years. It's probably not going to change in the next 10 years, and it's probably going to stay mostly the same forever. Is you walk into a building, you plug in, you get access because no one bothers deploying any sort of port controls or anything like that. In the last 10 years, it's become a lot more common for businesses to have Wi-Fi, as this has become super cheap now and everyone has it even at home. So you can just walk in and ask the receptionist for the Wi-Fi password, and 9 times out of 10 they'll just give it to you. And the other 1 time out of 10 you just don't even have to ask because it's written up on a whiteboard. Another way that we get access sometimes is through an assumed compromise. So where a business doesn't really care that so you're trying to avoid the Cadbury cream egg model where you have the hard shell outside with the soft gooey inside. So they want to assume that the hard shell is going to get breached anyway because it is, right? People are going to get in, someone's going to click on the email, some machine is going to get infected at some point. And then alternatively, now where things are deployed in the cloud more often, getting access, you kind of just have to deploy a VM into the virtual environment. So how you go about fixing these things, you could deploy 802.1x so that when someone plugs a device in that's not supposed to be on your network, then they just don't get access, which is really good. Or you can segregate your networks so there's no reason for your meeting rooms to have access to all of your servers. For some reason, no one does that, but for Wi-Fi, tell your staff to just not give out the Wi-Fi password to everyone and stop writing it on the whiteboard. Again, segregate your networks out. If you're going to give guests to your office a network to access the internet. So if you run a training facility or something like that and you need people to access the internet, set up a unique Wi-Fi that just gives them access to the internet and to none of your other internal resources. For an assumed compromise and for deploying a virtual machine, there's not really much that you can do for those since they're kind of like an assumed compromise situation anyway, so we're sort of bypassing the getting access bit at that point. So now that we have access and we're on the network, we're going to go and do some getting access to the first thing. So this is sort of assumed that we have a laptop plugged into the network, but we don't have access to any of the servers or anyone's desktop or any other things that might be in the network, like the printers or your networking equipment or other cool things like that. One of the tools that gets used all the time for this is Responder. It's basically the first thing that you'll spin up if you plug into a network. Like, you want to spin this up before you even start port scanning so that this can just run in the background and collect stuff for you for free. So this is one that I wasn't sure which order to put these two slides in. It might be easier for this one here. It kind of works like, we'll talk about LLMNR first. So Responder works using a protocol called LLMNR, which sort of came about from when hosting a DNS server used to be kind of expensive because CPU cycles cost a lot of resources. So what they would do is, if you're on the network and you want to know where something is and you don't have a DNS server, then you'll ping out to everyone on the local network and say like, hey, does anyone know where file server is? Which is kind of like what's happening here. And this sort of still happens today if you can't find the address through DNS sometimes. Your computer will say, does anyone know who file server is? And you can sort of see, or file share there, like misspelt. This sort of happens all the time. And sitting here with Responder, we just respond saying, hey, that's me. And obviously, because we respond really fast, they just throw us their creds back, because why would you not do that? And yeah, so sort of like it says here, the first response is trusted because fastest is obviously best. And yeah, it's still enabled by default in pretty much all Windows stuff, which is good. So for a bit of history, LLMNR was released in, or the RFC for it was released in January of 2007. So at this point, that's been around for, what's that, like 13-ish years. So yeah, we've hit our 10 plus years mark, which is good. Responder, not quite 10 years old yet, was put on GitHub, and the first upload that I could find for it on GitHub was October 2012, but then the modern repo was redone a little, like shortly after that. And it's still actively maintained, which is awesome. There's a Windows version as well. So the one that's on GitHub runs on Linux, but there's a Windows version as well, but that hasn't been updated in about 5 years. So that one's still out of date. It also has a couple issues when you try and get it to work, but you can sort of, if you're willing to put in the effort yourself, you can tweak it to make it work again. It looks kind of like this. So you just sit there in the background, and all of the green, or like, I don't know, has anyone been playing Among Us, like cyan? Yeah, the cyan is people pinging you saying like, hey, does anyone know who this is? And then we keep responding saying, hey, that's me, hey, that's me, hey, that's me, to everyone. And then eventually someone sends us back some creds like this. So in this one here, we get the user's username, we get the IP address of where it came from, and we get their NTLM-v2 hash, which is great, because then we can go and take that offline and crack it. Which is what happened in this case here. One of the guys on my team was on a network pentest, asked me to take these hashes and go and crack them using the cracking rig that you can see in this picture here. So we have a bunch of graphics cards that we use for cracking these hashes and turning them back into passwords. However, he probably could have done this one himself on his laptop because it was terrible. And then that's sweet. Once you've got that one password, often that's all you need to give yourself the foot in the door to the network to go and start attacking everything. So what's happened here is we've just gone to use that one password to then go and hit like every other account that we know exists to see what's it going to give us access to. When you find something like that, that's probably a default password that they've set for the first time, or you call up the help desk and they just reset your password. Yeah, how do you turn this off? There's one GPO that you just set to like off, and that's it, you're done, you're safe now. Cool. You might be thinking, but where did all these usernames come from? We're going to talk about that now. So AD Explorer is a really cool tool. Active Directory, as a bit of background, is like a centralized, I guess now is kind of like a Windows thing that runs on your domain controller that does all the authentication and authorization that says, you're allowed to access this server and you're not allowed to log into the printer over there and you can access this file share. But it holds a lot more information than that about people. It holds all the information that your organization needs about you to manage your internal profile. So things like your username, your first name, your last name, a description of who you are maybe. It holds your password, your contact details, and those group memberships that give you access to things. And with AD Explorer, we can see some of those things, depending on the account that we have and what that account has read access to. So AD Explorer is a tool that's a part of a tool suite now called sysinternals. It's put out by Microsoft and it's signed by Microsoft, so it'll run pretty much everywhere, even if they have like app whitelisting on, which is great. And it lets you take an offline copy of a whole lot of the attributes of a Active Directory so that then you can go and read these later offline. So especially in the case where you're not supposed to be somewhere and you plug in and you can get access to stuff, it might be way too much information for you to consume in the like 5 minutes that you have access, but you can take an offline copy and then go and read that at your leisure later on. With Active Directory, domain admins love to put service passwords into the description field, which I'll show you very shortly. And you can also find accounts that have been recently reset, sort of like we looked at before where there was the password one. If you go and find all the accounts that have had their password reset within like the last week or so, if it's like summer 2020, give that a go. It'll probably get you in the door. I tried to get a screenshot of AD Explorer to show you like what it looks like. Unfortunately, like everything in there, this looks like something out of an OIA. It's, yeah, I had to redact basically everything. The important bit that you can see here is in the description field, they were just chucking passwords in for the service accounts because domain admins assume that they're the only ones who can see Active Directory, which isn't true. Pretty much everyone has at least some read access to it. Yeah, so I had to even go and redact like a bunch of the password parts. Oh, it's terrible. But yeah, there's a bunch of cool fields in AD that you can have a look at to get passwords. So things like description, comments, user password, Unix user password, Unicode password, and I'm not even sure how to say that one, but yeah, that one as well. Cool. So for our history lesson here, Active Directory has been around a really long time now. So what's that, like 20 years for Active Directory as we know it today, but it's based on an even older thing, LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, which has been around since the early-ish 90s. I think it was like 1993 or something like that. There's been a few variations of it come out, and that's based on a whole bunch of like the directory access back from when it was like phone systems and things like that. So it's been around a really long time. But as we know it today, Active Directory got added to Windows in Windows 2000 server. AD Explorer was released in January of 2005 as a part of WinTernals by a guy who built a whole bunch of other tools that you can use to go and do like Windows administration things. It just happens that some of those tools happen to be really useful for doing hacking stuff as well, which is great. But I think he went from the company that he worked for that built this tool pack for doing administration. And I think they got acquired by Microsoft or something, which is how it became a Microsoft official tool. Yeah, so if Windows 2000 server was released in 17th of February 2000, the first password was probably added in the same day. Yeah, and this issue just isn't going to be going away anytime soon, if at all. It'll be one of those ones that hangs around forever as long as people have those on-site domain controllers for a long time. Cool. How do I fix this? You can just accept that every user can read AD because they're going to be able to read AD. Stop putting sensitive information in places where everyone can read it. I know this is probably a dirty word here, but do an audit of your AD. And don't use predictable password reset patterns. So stop using summer 2020, stop using password 123, stop just putting passwords into like plain text fields at all really would be good as well. Cool. So now that we've got a couple accounts, we're gonna go use those accounts to go and gather some more information. So if we look back at our picture of all the servers before, we've got that, we don't really have that first one, but like now we're gonna go look for more things. Cool. So everyone loves shares, everyone loves putting things available so that their coworkers have access to them because collaboration, right? That's how business works and we all go and make money. Especially when you're setting up your network and you're a domain admin and you need to be building those 20 laptops for all the new hires that have just come in. A lot of that needs to be done through auto-config stuff so you don't have to sit there for hours typing in all the passwords and setting everything up, and you can just script it and get it to work and everything is nice and we all live like utopia, right? Wrong. All the time we find passwords on domain controllers in like setup scripts and things like that. It's just a gold mine. Anytime that you go into a business that's at least like 5 to 10 years old, they're gonna have stuff like this lying around, and it's probably for service accounts, which generally the password never gets reset for. They have way more access than they need because the developer just gets told, it has to work, so make it happen today, and they just give it full access to everything, which is great. In terms of SMB looting, so like when you get access to a share, when people also expose shares on their local computers. So this can happen all the time by accident, especially in those smaller businesses back before you get central management of things. People expose a whole lot of shares or folders on their own local computer to share files with each other and just make things happen. Especially when you want to show people photos from your wedding that was like 10 years ago and you just leave them sitting there for 10 years along with your passwords file. That sounds made up, but it's not, it's true. I'll show you shortly. Also, yeah, don't store your bank's core server creds with exact instructions on how to log in on a share, because that's also true. Here's one that came up recently-ish. Was, yeah, big 4 password dump. It's not nice to like badmouth people, so we'll just say it was one of them. But yeah, you find like gold mine stuff all the time. It's fantastic. So they're like, from this password dump, you can then just go and like open that up and see like, oh cool, now we have passwords for all of the service accounts that they haven't changed since forever as well. Here's the wedding photos that I talked about before. Here's another one, which was yeah. I found it and I was like, do I download that? Do I look at it? Do I just put it in the report and we'll leave it there? But I had to do it for you guys, so we opened the file. It was not dick pics, it was a joke. Cool, so here's our history lesson again, so back to things that are hopefully not too boring. So SMB was originally put together by Barry Feigenbaum. I had to look up how to pronounce that because I'm not particularly good at names. And yeah, 1983, so what's that, 37 years ago? Yeah, so yes, that hits our 10 years plus mark, so we're good there. The more as we know it today version of SMB was put in by Microsoft in 2006, so still 10 years plus, we're still good. And more recently, I say more recently, still like 8 years ago, SMB3 came out, which gave a whole bunch of like end-to-end encryption and AES-based message signing and things like that, that solve some of the problems where people were performing SMB relay attacks and things like that. Cool. If you find a share that you have access to, here's some cool stuff that you can do. SMB client is the only tool that you really need. Well, I find. It's in pretty much every Linux distro ever. You can just run these 2 commands. Definitely run the first one first so you know how much stuff is there before you try and download everything. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a problem where you're like, what am I going to do with this 10 terabytes of files? Yeah. Cool, so how do I fix this? You can limit who has access to what file shares. You can restrict what file shares or where in the network the file shares can be accessed from. So you could make it so that your staff can't access each other's devices over SMB, which is probably a good thing if you're not expecting them to be running file shares. I avoided the dirty word of audit here. Regularly review the files stored on your shares. You don't need to be sharing your wedding files with everyone. Please take those away. Ensure encryption and signing are both enabled and required. If you have SMB 3.0, I strongly recommend you go and patch it if you haven't. Otherwise, you've definitely been owned already. Cool. So now that we've got some access to some stuff, we want to go and access other things. And often you'll find that the important thing that you want to go access is really hard to get access to because it's been locked down to only being accessible from a couple developer machines, or you've compromised the test environment and you don't have access to the prod environment or something like that. One thing that's come up handy a couple of times, especially where we've got access to just about everything except the one thing that we want, is this sweet trick that works every time. Like, I've never seen this one not work. Is the domain controller can just go everywhere, because of course it can. Yeah, once you get access to the domain controller, you can just RDP to everything, which is great. We had this happen in, how do I tell a story without giving away too much? We had like domain admin access on the domain controller, but they were like, it's totally fine, that doesn't matter, we don't care, you can take over everything as long as you can't hit this one box over here. And so we went from our test box that we had set up, we used our domain admin creds and try and log in to the bad box. Didn't work. So we're like, oh shit, what do we do now? Just RDP to the domain controller, use that to then go to the bad thing, and we win, and we, yeah, get the money, get paid. Cool. So on a similar vein to that, like once you've got full access, like that's generally viewed as like winning when you're doing a network pen test, is if you can get onto the domain controller and you can dump these two files, the SAM and system files. From there you can go and like, you get everyone's password hashes, and then you can go and take those offline, and that's considered, and crack them, and that's considered winning. But often from a business perspective, they don't give a shit about that, because like, who cares? You can go and take over all of our accounts. But as a project manager, that doesn't matter to me, because all I care about is that, I don't know, the power keeps going, or that we don't lose all the money for the bank, or that you haven't stolen our new designs for a new product that hasn't come out yet. So this isn't really a technical tip as much as it is like, know what your goal is and know what's going to demonstrate impact, especially if you've been brought in by an internal team who's trying to demonstrate that there are issues with the internal network, that they're trying to get funding to go and fix other problems. They'll need to demonstrate to their boss that this is actually impactful. And the impact could be that like, oh no, they got access to all of the money. And then suddenly it's security has unlimited funding to go and fix everything. Cool. So as a brief summary of what we've learned today, we talked about what is a network pen test. We talked about getting access to a network. We talked about Responder, reading Active Directory with AD Explorer, SMB looting, using other servers as pivots, and things more valuable than dumping SAM and system. I got told I should make a joke here about somebody breaking up with me, but I couldn't come up with anything, so that's what you guys get. Cool. Thanks for coming. If you'd like a job in security, please come and talk to me about working for Quantum. We're hiring, especially for pen testers at the moment. Cool. Does anyone have any questions? Cool. Thank you for coming.